It is Tuesday, November 9th, 7 p.m. here in Washington, D.C., and I'd like to welcome you to another edition of Nation's Pastime in the nation's capital, WCUA's only baseball-centric talk show. I'm your host, Andrew Snaith, and as always, here with my co-hosts James Higgins and Robbie Cruz, and we'll be breaking down the latest in the baseball world, and now, of course, the baseball offseason. But first, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. We are live every Tuesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on WCUA Radio, and our shows are posted to YouTube the day after in podcast form. You can find all that information about where to listen to them on our Instagram account at @PastimeCap. We post all the information there along with highlights of our latest shows, and we'll be posting some off-season news and significant stuff there as well on both our account and on our story. So go ahead, follow us at @PastimeCap on Instagram for all that information. And if you want to call in tonight during any part of the show to talk about anything baseball related, it's the off-season, so there's a lot more free time to talk about that kind of stuff now. That number's 202-319-5106, 202-319-5106. Also, if you're not a fan of calling in live during a show, but you have a question that you want us to answer on the show, shoot us a DM on Instagram at @PastimeCap. We'd be happy to read your question on our next live show once we get it. So feel free to do that if you're not comfortable with calling in during the live show. So a quick rundown for how tonight's show is going to be. It's going to be a little more structured now that we're in the off-season. Of course, we'll be talking about whatever the latest news is of the week, but we're also going to structure with some more discussions and series throughout the next couple weeks and months. And guys, it's potentially going to be a longer off-season than normal, so we don't really know how long that is going to last, of course. But we're going to get you through it here on NPNC. So quick rundown tonight. We're going to go over the news. We're going to recap the Braves as the 2021 World Series champions, talk about that series, that Game 6 that we left you with last week. And then, of course, the big discussion tonight is going to be the qualifying offers, who got it, who didn't, who's accepted so far, who's declined, and then, of course, the award finalists, which have been announced, the top 3 for each award. We're going to do a lightning round and give our predictions on each and who we have winning them. So, guys, let's just get right into it with the news from this week. And the first piece I want to highlight is a signing that has already happened of a guy who a lot of people feel like is going to be a big bounce-back candidate in the starting rotation, and that is Andrew Heaney signing for 1 year, $8 million with the Los Angeles Dodgers.
The Dodgers are a pitching factory. They know exactly what to do, and I'm sure as they did with Corey Knebel and even to a lesser extent Blake Trinan. I know he rebounded in Oakland, but the Dodgers, everyone they seemingly bring in as a veteran turns it around from a pitching standpoint, and I would expect no different from Andrew Heaney. They obviously have something on him. Andrew Friedman does a tremendous job bringing in veterans who are outcast by whatever team they were on, in this case the Yankees. Heaney's going to fill the number 4 or 5 role in the Dodgers rotation. I'm sure they know exactly what they need to do to fix him, to make him right, and he'll probably play a pivotal role on next year's Dodgers team.
Robbie, got to hear your thoughts on the Andrew Heaney signing, of course, a guy who spent half of the year with the Yankees in 2021 and didn't do particularly well. Thoughts on the deal that he ended up getting? Do you think a bounce back is possible after watching him pitch for a while?
To say that he didn't do particularly well, that's ridiculous. He was horrible as a Yankee. He nearly cost the Yankees a playoff spot. I don't think people understand that enough. He only had a 2-2 record, but that 7.32 ERA was a lot worse than it actually was, because he came out of the bullpen and he would give up runs that were for the guys that were on base. But the big picture here, Dodgers signing Andrew Heaney. I don't think that he's going to have any impact on the Dodgers season whatsoever. If he is going to have an impact, I think it's going to be a negative impact. Yes, the Dodgers have helped a lot of guys turn it around, but this is a guy who I don't believe is going to turn it around. I know a lot of people compared him to Robbie Ray. They're saying he's Robbie Ray Part 2 because he's a guy that gave up a lot of home runs and he just needed a change of scenery, and once he gets that change of scenery, he's going to figure it out. He's a big strikeout pitcher. Yes, all these things are true, but to me, Andrew Heaney doesn't have that big pitch like Robbie Ray does. Robbie Ray has one of the filthiest sliders in baseball. Heaney doesn't really have that wipeout pitch, and he gives up so many hits. When Robbie Ray was with Arizona and last year with Toronto, he wasn't giving up as many hits as Heaney does this year. Heaney gives up so many hits, gives up a lot of walks, a lot of base runners. He's a disaster.
So not really seeing Andrew Heaney having a giant impact on the Los Angeles Dodgers, so you don't overall like this deal.
He's going to have an impact, but it's going to be a negative impact. And the fact that people are saying that this is Robbie Ray Part 2, yes, I like to joke around about it, but realistically, he's not going to be Robbie Ray Part 2. He's not going to win the Cy Young Award. He's not going to be in the discussion. He's going to be bad again, and I can guarantee that. And he's probably going to be coming out of the Dodger bullpen.
Well, given the season that Andrew Heaney had, got to give credit to him and to his agent. I mean, turning that into a 1 year, $8 million deal deal is pretty impressive.
It's what advanced analytics does nowadays. Like, people will sign guys if they have good advanced analytics numbers, because Andrew Heaney has a good FIP. Like, have you heard of FIP? Like,
yeah, of
fielding
course.
independent pitching? Like,
Of course.
his FIP numbers, yes, they're really good, but the fact that he has a good FIP lands him an $8 million contract after performing as poorly as he did. That man wet the bed with the New York Yankees, and the fact that he's getting $8 million because of his FIP and other advanced analytics, I think it's ridiculous. I think it's ASA 9, ASA 10, and ASA 11.
Very strongly put by Robbie there. Not a fan of the Andrew Heaney signing. We'll have to see how it plays out. One of the first major ones here of the offseason. Going over to the side of coaching and managers, a former manager has found a new job, although it is not as a manager. That, of course, Jace Tingler, who is now the Twins bench coach. And we talked about on here how we didn't really think he was that great of a manager. It seems like this role may be one that fits him a little better, don't we think?
Yeah, I mean, obviously somebody had to take the fall for the Padres' on-field struggle this year, and no better place to start than the on-field manager. But I'm sure, a bench coach role will suit Tingler very well. He's a baseball guy. He's a great baseball mind. He knows his stuff, and I'm sure he's going to use this to try to bounce back and get another managerial shot in the next 2 or 3 years, right? I mean, that's usually how the managerial cycle works. You fizzle out of one spot, you go coach somewhere for 2 or 3 years, you come right back in the hiring cycle and get hired somewhere else. So we'll see what happens. Maybe I'll take over from Minnesota if things don't go well for Rocco Baldelli this year. But it's a good landing spot for Jace Tingler. I think Minnesota is a great place for him to get back on his feet. We'll see what happens. Obviously, there's a lot of turmoil there. Trading Barrios at the deadline. Who knows what's going to happen with Byron Buxton this coming season? Trading away Nelson Cruz. So that roster is in full rebuild. Will they trade Josh Donaldson this offseason? That's a big question. But good for Tingler. Way to get back on his feet, and I'm sure he'll find a managerial spot in the next 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with everything that James said. The big picture is that he's going to a team that isn't looking to be super competitive this year, and I don't think he's going to have that big of a role for the Twins. I think he's just going to kind of be there to be there. And James is right. If Rocco Baldelli does get fired, look for a guy like Jace Tingler to step in and be the manager, whether it's going to be for a little bit or for an extended period of time. So good for Jace Tingler. It's good to see that he got a job in baseball immediately after getting fired.
Absolutely, and of course the Padres in good hands managerial-wise with Bob Melvin. We'll have to see how both of those situations play out. Finally, the last news segment I wanted to mention here, just touch on it briefly before we get into some of the more structured discussion about the Braves and qualifying offers and awards, is the news that came out today about the Oakland Athletics and the fact that they may potentially go for a sort of blow-up. And I think it's surprising, but it's also not surprising. This is a team that has not historically spent a lot of money, that has not had a high payroll, and you have a lot of guys on their team, Chapman, Olsen, Bassett, who are about to get a lot of money potentially in arbitration. And it doesn't seem like the A's are willing to spend that, and they are apparently listening to offers on those three. Plus, I've heard Minaya, I've heard Montas. I've heard even guys like Piscotty and Andrews, if they have any value. And, it is interesting because this is a team that almost made the playoffs this year. They were not a bad team.
No, but Oakland is embracing their next rebuild. I think Chris Bassett is going to be the most attractive trade piece for teams, obviously right up there with Minaya. But if you're a contender, you're going to look to go get Chris Bassett. I mean, if Toronto lets Robbie Ray walk, that could be a huge landing spot for Chris Bassett. The Boston Red Sox, if they look to upgrade their rotation, Chris Bassett could be firmly in the mix. In Chaim Bloom's plans, obviously, you have the Yankees wanting to upgrade after Cole. I think pretty much every contender in baseball, but specifically the American League, should look to go get Chris Bassett. He's proven he can pitch in the American League. He's had a very solid track record for the last few years. It's unfortunate that the A's are having another fire sale. You thought they were finally on the cusp of being that first great A's team to win a World Series for the first time in so long, but Billy Beane is embracing the rebuild. We'll see what happens with the future of Matt Olson and Matt Chapman. I mean, the A's historically don't pay guys. How much value will they get when they decide to trade them? Will they hold on to them for too long and not get enough value? We'll see. That's always the big question in Oakland. But, this offseason, it's going to be hard to project when things are going to play out because of the looming CBA negotiations and the lockout, but it's going to be a fire sale in Oakland, whether it happens before the December 2nd deadline or after.
Now, I got to go to Robbie here because this is a guy who talked to me off mic about it, I would say 2 or so weeks ago, about the Oakland Athletics potentially...
Several times, by the way.
Several times, about them potentially rebuilding, and I kind of pushed it off and said, no, I don't see that. They almost made the postseason. They've had a good team. But the fact that their arbitration-eligible players are set to make in the upper $10 to $15 million a year range, I didn't realize. And, looking back on it now, that was a really good take by Robbie. So, Robbie, thoughts on the Athletics and the potential blow-up?
Yeah, no, I definitely think that they are going to be blowing things up. I think that's pretty clear. I don't think they're going to trade all the guys that we just listed on the show. I think that's too many.
They can, or they're going to be fielding a double.
Yeah. Realistically, I expect them to trade 2 guys, maybe 3.
I think Bassett's a given, right? He almost has to go.
Yeah, I would say probably both Bassett and Minaya. If you trade one, why not trade the other? You're not going anywhere.
I'm going to say Bassett and I'll go Minaya as well, but Olsen's definitely getting traded as well. And we heard.
You really think Olsen this offseason?
I've been saying for a long time, Matt Olson's getting traded, and I do think that there's a good chance that he goes to the Yankees just because they've shown so much interest in him. It'll be interesting to see whether the Yankees decide to go for Matt Olson or Anthony Rizzo because they're both very similar players, only Olson's more of a power hitter.
Right.
But to me, I'm going to say that Olson is definitely getting traded. Bassett, I think he will also go. Minaya, I think he's also going to. But to mention like Piscotty, Andrews, I've heard people say Lou Trevino. I don't see those guys getting traded realistically. I really just think that's going to be the 2 Oakland pitchers and then Matt Olson. And I don't see Matt Chapman getting traded, by the way. I think that's a bit of a long shot.
I do, too. Also, a name that I also want to highlight here, like I said, Montas. Guys coming off of a PED suspension, but, the talent's there, but how much are teams going to trust him to return to what he potentially could be, and how's that going to affect his trade value?
Well, he's a lefty, so he'll always get a chance. But, yes, he still does have upside.
Montas? He's ready.
Montas is ready.
Oh, I was thinking Minaya. Sorry. Mm-hmm. But in terms of the upside, that upside will always be there for Montas, and I think if you're a contender, you're gonna be calling Billy Bean's phone every day, especially when those winter meetings happen, if they do happen, with the impending stoppage. But you look at what teams have and what teams are willing to get. I feel like the A's would be a team that you could get. You could make a deal on the cheaper end compared to what you might have to give up to get a high-end caliber player for other teams. We'll see what ends up happening. We'll see what direction Billy Bean wants to go in, but it's definitely going to be a fire sale. It's not going to be pretty for A's fans, and it's unfortunate because that division is going to get competitive very fast, very soon. The Rangers are going to have a lot of money to spend. The Mariners are on the up and up. The Astros are the Astros. We know what they can do, and the Angels have 2 generational talents. So the A's might be in the cellar for a little bit if this fire sale does end up happening, and it's going to be these next 3 or 4 years that really determine how soon the next great A's team will come about.
Yeah, I was going to say, you got a lot of teams there in the AL West that could be very good this coming year. You have the Angels, who have said multiple times, and indications have shown that they may spend money on starting pitching. Of course, their weakness for as long as we can remember to build around those 2 generational talents. You have the Texas Rangers, who a lot of insiders and writers think might go after one of these big shortstops.
Corey Seager, Carlos Correa, even Trevor Story if they miss out on one of those 2. The Rangers have money to spend. They just opened up a new stadium. They traded Joey Gallo, so there's no impending Joey Gallo contract. They need a star to start the rebuild for this next great Rangers team, right? We saw how good the Rangers can be, how passionate Rangers fans can be when they made their 2 runs to the World Series, led by Ian Kinsler, Elvis Andrus, Nelson Cruz, Josh Hamilton. The list goes on for how talented those teams were. But the Rangers need a superstar to be at the centerpiece of this next rebuild. They tried to do it with Alex Rodriguez, signing him to the 10-year deal before the 0-1 season. That didn't end up working out. But somebody like Correa, somebody like Corey Seager, somebody like Trevor Story, pair that with, maybe a guy like Noah Syndergaard, who's from Texas, and, take a 1-year flyer on Syndergaard. Pairing the 2 of them, pairing one of the shortstops with a pitcher like Syndergaard or a pitcher like Ray to start the next rebuild could really jumpstart the Rangers and really speed up the rebuild process in Texas. They have a lot of money to spend. They want to open up that new stadium in grand style. We'll see what ends up happening.
Yeah, and that's a great segue for one of our first discussions that we're going to have this offseason. And we're going to do an offseason discussion where we go division by division and talk about what every team needs to do, should do, whatever it may be. And the first one we're going to start off with next week is going to be the AL West. Guys, we have a lot to talk about there because, like you said, those are 5 teams. Well, I'm going to say probably 4 if the A's do blow up. That could potentially all be trying to win that division next year. Definitely one to watch. And the Rangers are definitely a team to watch for big free agent signings this offseason. So that'll finish up the news. Let's go into the discussion on the Braves. And I don't know if you've missed it by chance, but the Braves did win the World Series in 6 games. After we left on Tuesday night last week, they did finish it off a 7-0 victory over the Houston Astros. World Series MVP, as someone here actually predicted right, was Jorge Soler. So I did get one right. I have to, gotta give myself a shout out there, right?
Yeah, we'll give you a tip of the cap.
Thank you. That's all I was looking for now. But
I don't know what it is with you and the World Series MVPs, but it's every single year Andrew always gets the World Series MVP right. He will get the playoff brackets completely wrong, but he always says this guy's going to win the World Series MVP. And honestly, I'm impressed.
Hey, you know what? And not to, toot my own horn here, but 2018, I did make that prediction in the middle of September for Steve Pearce. So, I don't know, something about it, yeah. But, no, let's talk about the Braves, though, because they had a phenomenal season. Time and time again, we've talked about how good they did at the trade deadline and the fact that they were able to pull off a World Series championship without Ronald Acuna Jr. Guys, I think it just shows that anyone really can win a World Series if you really just go for it. I mean, and that's what happened. Anthopoulos believed in his team.
Exactly. It's all about upper management believing in the team and giving the guys down there confidence, especially after the loss to Acuna. They were never over 500 until August 6th, which is crazy to think about. But, they won 44 games before the All-Star break. They won 44 games after the All-Star break. They won the World Series in the 44th week of the year. They had 44 for Hank Aaron, cut in the grass all season long. A nice tribute and ode to Hank Aaron that, there really are no coincidences, and that truly is special. They were a team of destiny, from the beginning of the postseason. Again, what a performance by Jorge Soler, the monster home run in Game 6.
Oh,
Freddie
man.
Freeman,
beauty.
Two incredible home runs. Mr. Brave. What more can you say? Everybody showed up. Austin Riley had a tremendous series. Max Fried absolutely shoving. Congrats to the Braves. They deserved it. They earned it. And time for Atlanta to party like it's 1995. Seriously, this could be the next start of a great Braves run. Maybe this will be their only World Series like it was in '95, but maybe it won't be. They're getting Mike Soroka back next year. They're getting, and I hate doing this. It's too early for it. I'm not calling them a dynasty. They're getting Acuna back. They're getting legit pieces back. You never know. This might be the only one, but it could also be the start of something special. But the parade looked tremendous.
Minus a couple incidents.
Yes. Tyler Matzik almost getting arrested for absolutely no reason. He was trying to hop on his bus, and for some reason, the cops tried to arrest him, but he got out of a jam one more time.
To be fair, though, he did look like a Braves fan. Just going along with the parade.
Yeah, who wears a Tyler Matzik jersey, right?
Hey,
no. That's nothing against Matzik, but do you think they were selling Matzik jerseys before this postseason?
Hey, you know what? After his efforts this postseason, he didn't earn that nickname that I'm not going to say on air for no reason. I mean, let's just say that.
Yeah, no, definitely. But, it was a tremendous series for the Braves, a tremendous season for the Braves. What they accomplished is nothing short of incredible. The contributions of the guys from the trade deadline: Rosario, Jock Peterson, Jorge Soler, as you mentioned, Adam Duvall, all big hits in the series. This is the Braves parade for NPNC, right? Like they deserved it, they earned it. They were a tremendous team. They had a great parade. They'll probably re-sign Freddie Freeman. I don't see Freeman going anywhere else, especially after the World Series. And a great end to a great season for the Braves. And now it's on to the offseason.
And honestly, it's almost surprising if you think about it that this was the Braves team to get it done.
Yeah, without Acuna. I do feel bad for Acuna, but
yeah.
I know you can say that they did it without him, but honestly, they probably wouldn't have been there without him because they wouldn't have upgraded as much.
Right.
And if he wasn't on the team, they wouldn't have even sniffed being close to 500 in the first half. He picked up the slack for Freddie Freeman having an awful April and May. Freeman was tremendous from June on, but he was horrible in the first 2 months of the season. Acuna really picked up the slack. So
yeah, also something to think about. I mean, if he doesn't go down with that injury, does this, and this is a game of what ifs, but does the same thing play out? Because if you think about it, the big moves they made at the deadline were all because, hey, we're 2 games under 500. We may have lost Acuna, but we think that we can replace him with three other players.
They probably would have gotten 1 or 2 of those guys.
That's what I'm
upgrade
saying.
In left field. They probably would have gotten Duvall back because he was there last year, and they probably would have gone to get Jock Peterson, but I don't think they would have gotten Rosario. I don't think they would have gotten Soler. Soler was really the replacement for Acuna in terms of like production, but also the right-handed power bat in the outfield. But credit to Alex Anthopoulos for believing in the team, and credit for Freeman and Riley and Ozzie Albies for really picking up the slack while the guys from the trade deadline really got integrated. They picked up the slack throughout July and the beginning of August, and then they just took off, and they were really a team of destiny. And again, congrats to the Braves. They beat a really good Astros team. That should not be understated. They didn't get lucky. This wasn't a fluke. They were a very talented team that beat a really good Astros team and earned every single win, and they earned this World Series.
Without question, they did. The 2021 World Series champions, the Atlanta Braves. So congratulations to them and all Braves fans. And like James said, it's on to the offseason. And let's get into the offseason discussion because, well, there's a lot to talk about. And the first thing that we want to highlight here, you know what, actually, James, do you want to go ahead and talk about the qualifying offers, or should we go through the award finalists real quick?
Let's go the QOs real quick, and then we'll go to the award finalists and the Hank Aaron Award winners who were just announced before we came on air.
Yes, of course. So we'll save that for the award discussion. But yeah, let's talk about those qualifying offers, as a number of players were extended them, a number of players were not extended them. And of course, in case you're wondering, if that qualifying offer is extended by a team, correct me if I'm wrong here, James, they do get a draft pick as compensation if they sign elsewhere.
Yes, they do. And the player has 10 days to accept or reject the offer. And we already have one big-time rejection.
Yes, we sure do.
Which was to be expected, but, he was coming off a down year, so you just didn't know.
Yeah, I'm actually not sure if that was to be expected. Of course, we're talking about Michael Conforto of the New York Mets. Not really sure if that was expected. I mean, it would have been 1 year, $18.9 million. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I think 18.4.
Oh, is it 18.4 now?
Yeah,
okay.
The number changes every year.
It does every year, right. Okay, so $18.4 million. But, if I'm Michael Conforto, I might just take that and try to build my value back. But apparently, according to him and his agent, they're thinking they can get a multi-year deal out of this.
Well, the thing with Conforto is that it's not like he had a flash in the pan in 2020, and then in 2021 he bottomed out. This was a blip in the radar, and in a weird, it wasn't as weird as 2020, but it was still a weird COVID year, especially at the beginning of the year, with all the protocols, the lack of availability maybe to certain trainers or coaches in the offseason. I think Conforto's track record speaks for itself. I mean, he's from 2017 through 2020, he had 3 of those 4 seasons. He had 30 homers and 100 RBIs. He had an OPS of 890 during that 4-year stretch. I think 2021 was a weird year, but his track record speaks for itself. He's a Scott Boras guy. He more times than not he's going to elect free agency. I think that Conforto's an elite player, and I don't think there's any ifs, ands, or buts about it. Yes, he had a down year, but Michael Conforto has a legit track record. He has a legit 4 or 5 year track record with the Mets. It speaks for itself, and I think there are going to be a lot of suitors out there for him. I think the Mets will definitely try to re-sign him. I think another team that jumps out to a lot of people are the Philadelphia Phillies because of Kevin Long, being hired as the hitting coach there, and his past connections with Michael Conforto, and a lot of the Mets. Another guy who's linked to the Phillies, who we'll get to later, is Kyle Schwarber. We'll see about that with Schwarber, but I think Conforto could be another huge centerpiece of this next great Phillies team. To another big time outfielder to go along with Bryce Harper. I think he projects somewhere to get a 5 or 6 year deal between 120 and 150 million. From the low to high end, depending on what teams value him at. But look, Conforto's a legit player. He's got an elite arm in the field. He's got a plus bat. He's got legit pop. I mean, he's pretty close to being a 5-tool player. So I'd hedge the bet. I'd hedge the farm on Conforto rebounding. I'd give him a long-term deal. We'll see what happens. We'll see what kind of deal he gets. We'll see how much interest he has.
Yeah, so you really do think that 2021 was a blip for him?
Yeah, I think you go back and you look at what Conforto has done over the course of his career. I mean, yeah, everyone has down years. I mean, obviously the worst time to have it is in your contract year. There's no question about that. But
right.
This isn't something where he broke out in 19 or 20 and then this was a reversion back to the norm. No, I mean, he's only a career 255 hitter, so he's not going to hit for average. But in 5 full seasons, he's got 132 career home runs. So the pop is clearly there. He's got an 824 career OPS, and that was dampened by his 729 OPS this year. In 17, his only All-Star game selection, he had a 939 OPS. He had an 856 OPS in 19, a 927 OPS in 20. Again, 30 home runs in 3 or 4 years between 17 and 20. While he's never been a 100 RBI guy in terms of his production, I would say a lot of that is because he has had some injury issues. But so durability can be a concern. But the guy's essentially a 30 homer, 100 RBI guy. When you really look at it, you want to say 30-90, fine, but the pop is there.
Yeah,
the bat is there. I think it plays. I really do.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because teams are going to be, balancing this fine line of, we don't want to overpay him and risk him being someone who is his 2021 version. But there's also going to be this idea. I think a lot of teams are like, hey, if we can lock him up on a multi-year deal for much less than he's actually worth, that's a risk that we're willing to take. And I kind of have to agree with James there.
Would Conforto take that?
that's what it becomes. Would he actually want to take that? I mean, we've seen guys in the past couple years who have had bad contract years kind of take a one-year deal and bet on themselves and it working in their favor. I mean, you think of Josh Donaldson, you think of Didi Gregorius. I mean, there's
Marcus Semien.
I was just going to say, one of the finalists for the AL MVP. So it's definitely something that's worked. It's just interesting to me to see. And, of course, I could be wrong here because Conforto could take a one-year deal. I just don't see him settling for one, considering that he denied this qualifying offer.
There's going to be a team or two that comes out of the woodworks that offers him like a 5 or 6 year deal between 120 and 145 million that he'll end up taking, and he'll take his services there.
Yes, without question. So let's go on to someone who didn't decline a qualifying offer because he didn't even receive one. And the situation behind this is baffling to me. And that, of course, is Colorado Rockies starter Jon Gray. Now, James, of course, as we know, he was chosen not to be dealt at the deadline. And this was a name that was in a lot of trade rumors. There was a lot of people looking for starting pitching. And people were saying, hey, Jon Gray, he's about to be a free agent, potentially be a free agent. He's going to be on the market. And the Rockies decided not to trade him. They held on to him. And the thought was, hey, maybe they'll extend the qualifying offer. Maybe that's how the route that they're going to go. But they didn't even extend him one. So they didn't trade him at the deadline. They didn't extend him an offer. And now, if he walks and goes to another team, they're going to get no compensation. What's the process? What's the thought process behind the Colorado Rockies and Jon Gray?
They don't have a thought process because what the thought process that some thought with Trevor Story was the reason why they didn't trade him was because they valued the draft pick compensation from the QO more than they would have gotten in the return. So that's why they held on to him. They did extend a qualifying offer to Trevor Story,
right?
Which he hasn't officially rejected it yet, but he will reject it and become a free
agent.
I think we all know that. So for Story, at least with Story, they offered him a QO. They will get a draft pick compensation back for him, and they valued that pick more than they valued whatever prospects or major league players they were getting back in return. With Jon Gray, I have no clue. I really have no idea because I think we've seen that he's a very good major league pitcher, and that when he's on, he's probably a top 30 pitcher in the game. But it's hard to pitch in Colorado. He actually pitched better in Colorado this year than he did on the road.
Yeah.
But not offering him a QO makes zero sense because worst case for the Rockies, they end up with another season of Jon Gray, which would be a good thing for them if he accepts it. If he rejects it, you get draft pick compensation, and I don't think teams would be afraid to sign Jon Gray because of that compensation because he's worth it. And I think Jon Gray is going to have a fair number of suitors knocking on his door and calling his phone when he really gets into the swing of free agency. I mean, if you're a contender, could you not want Jon Gray on your team?
No, of course. I think it's baffling because if it does end up that they re-sign him, I guess the thought process is, they don't think he's valued at $18 million for the year. But if that's your thought process, why not just trade him in July?
Exactly. If you're not going to offer him a QO, you trade him.
Exactly.
That's what doesn't make any sense to me.
No, absolutely baffling. Although we are talking about a front office and an organization that has made some questionable decisions over the past couple years. So not a whole lot of surprise that it's the Rockies that we're talking about in this aspect. But let's go to some other guys who didn't receive the qualifying offer. How about Clayton Kershaw, of course? Not a huge surprise, but I think it is pretty evident that, maybe not evident, but I think it's a real possibility that he pitched his last game as a Los Angeles Dodger.
Yeah, the health has been a huge concern, especially with the back injuries, that have mounted the last few years. We'll see what happens, but it could very possibly be Kershaw moving on somewhere else because they could have found his replacement in Scherzer. Not that you can ever replace two generational guys, but in terms of that veteran anchoring the rotation, we'll see where Scherzer goes. Obviously, he cannot be offered the qualifying offer as he was traded at the deadline. But if Kershaw's still got a lot left in the tank. And he might not be what he was at h's peak, and at his peak, he's probably the best pitcher that any of us have ever seen, probably the best pitcher since Pedro Martinez at his peak. But, Kershaw's still a very good pitcher. He's not peak Kershaw. He's still a good pitcher that can give teams legit innings, that can give teams a legit arm in the postseason, and that can hopefully hold up over a full season. But whoever signs him is going to have to treat him very delicately, given his health the last few years.
I think a name to watch for that, I don't know if you agree with this, but Texas Rangers. Not only do they have the money to spend, he's from Texas.
Yeah, let's just get into the Rangers right now for a quick second.
For sure.
I think for the Rangers, you look out for Noah Syndergaard. He's from Texas. Take a flyer on him on a one-year deal. Clayton Kershaw, he's from Texas. Corey Seager. Alex Rodriguez was at the center of what was supposed to be their rebuild in 2001 with a 10-year, $250 million contract. It didn't work out. The Rangers in 2010 and 11 were, as we talked about, were great. They need a couple superstars to be at the center of their next great team, the next, this Texas Rangers rebuild, to lead them into the future. They just opened a stadium. Corey Seager, Carlos Correa, Trevor Story, one of those three shortstops would be the perfect position player to be at the center of that rebuild. And a pitcher like Kershaw, Noah Syndergaard, maybe even Justin Verlander, Robbie Ray, one of those guys, Kevin Gossman. You need 2 stars to be at the center of the rebuild. They have a lot of money to spend. They just opened up a new stadium. They traded Joey Gallo away, so they've got a lot of money on the books. They need 2 superstars. One of the shortstops and a legit pitcher. That should be the Texas Rangers offseason goal this year.
I'd have to agree. I think one of the 5 shortstops is going to end up in the Texas Rangers. Now, out of thin air, you just pick a name. Who do you think is going to be?
Corey Seager.
Wow. Now, that's a big one, especially because of the other teams that have been eyeing him. Of course, the Los Angeles Dodgers really want to re-sign him, I'm sure, and also the Yankees as well, though.
That's who I think the Rangers have the best chance of signing. I don't know where Seager's going to go. Yeah. I really don't. I'm not giving my prediction for Seager right now because I've been outspoken about the Dodgers, probably re-signing him. I don't think that's going to end up happening now. But, I think the Rangers are really going to make an aggressive push at Corey Seager. I really do. And when you talk about the other shortstops, Correa is probably going to go to Detroit or New York. Detroit, they have a bunch of money to spend. They're a young team on the up and up, coming up faster than a lot of people think. And, of course, A.J. Hinch is in the dugout. And then, he's been linked to the Yankees because who isn't linked to the Yankees, right?
Right, yeah, of course.
But, I think the Rangers could really make a big, strong push for either Trevor Story or for Corey Seager. And I think one of those two should be at the center of their rebuild, really.
Without question, let's switch over to some of the guys who did get a qualifying offer. And one in particular I want to talk about, and this was some pretty big news when it was announced. We got Nick Castellanos, who opted out. He's going to be offered, or was offered the qualifying offer. He's going to deny it, of course.
He's in line for a big payday.
I was going to say, this seems like the stars are aligning for Nick Castellanos. There's a lot of teams that could use his services.
Deservedly so. He's a tremendous player. I mean, I think he's one of the more underrated guys in baseball in terms of the production that he's put up. He was a former Tigers top prospect, never really clicked there. But, ever since he got traded to the Cubs and now with the Cincinnati Reds, he's done nothing but perform. I mean, and how can you beat what he did in a contract year? This is not technically, it wasn't, because if he had a bad year, he would have opted in. But I mean,
yeah, props to them getting the deal done where he had the ability to opt out. I mean, and it worked out perfectly for him. I mean, I don't think it's a stretch to say that he probably will be top 5, top 6 in the NL MVP this year.
Absolutely not. I mean, he had 34 bombs and hit 309. I mean, he was leading the NL in batting average for a while this year. He had 100 RBIs right on the dot. He had a 939 OPS. He had a tremendous season. He's probably a top 5 free agent on the market, and he's going to have a lot of teams going after his services. And I think teams that you probably wouldn't expect just because the caliber of player that he is, who wouldn't want Nick Castellanos on their team?
And here's the other thing we have to remember. There's a very good possibility that once everything's sorted out, you got 15 more designated hitter spots opening up, one where he fits perfectly.
Right. Castellanos can play the outfield. There's no question about that. He's a good fielder. But if you add the DH in there for somebody like Castellanos, he only has to play the outfield 4 or 5 times a week. That's even more of a value.
That's even more of a, I think, incentive to give him the kind of money that he was going to ask for.
I think he might get $100 million.
I think he will get $100 million.
He got $64 million last time in the free agent market. He had 2 really good seasons with the Reds. He could definitely get 5-year deal, $110 million, similar to what J.D. Martinez got in 2018 with the Red Sox. Speaking of J.D., he opted into his contract the last year of his 5-year, $110 million contract. So that has big implications for the Red Sox going forward, and it takes a big bat off the free agent market for teams, especially NL teams who maybe thought they could get JD to come be their DH. Now he's off the board.
Yeah, I don't think there was a whole lot of surprise there, though. It seemed like he was gonna.
It did seem like he was gonna opt in, but you just never know. You never know with somebody like that. He's still one of the most feared hitters in the American League. I think that if teams had the chance to go get him, why wouldn't you try to go get JD Martinez? But a big keep for the Red Sox. One of the most fearful hitters in the American League. He's a force in the lineup, and that might complicate things for Schwarber, but that's a conversation for another day.
Yeah, definitely a conversation for another day, although I do want to quickly mention Chaim Bloom's statements on Schwarber. I'm sure you saw, James, that they feel like, I think the quote was, he's part of this team.
Yeah, and they're still engaged, and I definitely think the Red Sox can make room for Schwarber. He is an outfielder, so they could go trade Hunter Renfroe or Alex Verdugo if they want. That would have Schwarber in left. You could have Kike in center, one of those two in right, or you could move Kike Hernandez to second base if you want to keep everyone. You could trade Bobby Dahlbeck if you want to have Schwarber play first base. We saw that was a mixed bag this year, but if they think a full offseason of preparation and training, he could be an average defender at the position. Maybe they could trade Bobby Dahlbeck. I think the Red Sox are going to have a lot of decisions to make. I think they're going to have to end up trading Jarren Duran and one of the 3 guys I mentioned in Renfroe, Dahlbeck, and Verdugo for pitching. I don't really want to trade any of those guys, but guess what? If you're going to keep Schwarber, that probably has to happen, and the Red Sox need pitching. If they're not going to address it in the free agent market, they're going to have to go get it via trade. So that could be something that happens for the Red Sox. I hope Schwarber stays in Boston. I hope they give him what he deserves. I think he's probably going to get like a 5-year, $80 million deal, somewhere around that range. That sounds right. He had a career year this year. And, I think there's going to be a lot of teams knocking at Schwarber's door.
It's been a long time coming for Kyle Schwarber.
Yes, it has. Former top prospect.
Yeah. Then you can't forget what he did in 2016, making that comeback in the World Series.
Yep, off the torn ACL.
Just
really remarkable.
It is remarkable. He's had a great career up to this point. Obviously hasn't lived up to what a lot of people predicted he could be, but he's due for a payday.
And he started to show what people thought he could be this past year.
Right.
He was tremendous.
He was tremendous.
With the Nationals and the Red Sox.
Yeah, and he's at the top of the list of a very good outfield class, I think.
Yeah, really just a very good free agent class overall. I think the pitching is deep. You have the old guards. You have Verlander, Scherzer, Kershaw, but you also have guys like Robbie Ray. You have guys like Kevin Gossman. You have guys. Throw Noah Syndergaard's name in there. Sure, you have guys that, they're going to end up getting big paydays. And I think for a team like the Red Sox or like, let's stay in the American League East, like the Blue Jays, they're going to have decisions to make, and we'll see what ends up happening. But I think both of those teams are going to be in the market for in the free agent market for starting pitchers.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of teams in the division are going to be looking for that. And let me just finish out this qualifying offer conversation with a question for you, James. Of the list here that got the offers, and I can read it if you want me to, do you see anyone as pretty much a given to accept it who maybe hasn't already? Because I have a few names I think could be possible. You got Brandon Belt.
Yeah, Brandon Belt and Eduardo Rodriguez are the two that really stick out to me.
I was going to say Eduardo Rodriguez was my other one. I wanted to know your thoughts on that. But I feel like it makes the most sense for them, even if they don't end up accepting it. I don't really see maybe Rodriguez, but I don't see Brandon Belt going to a different team.
No, if Belt doesn't accept it, he'll probably work out a long-term deal with the Giants. I think the big thing with Eduardo Rodriguez is, yes, he got snake-bitten this year in terms of, his overall stats weren't as good as his peripherals. He actually had a decent FIP. Eddie, he was inconsistent this year, sure. But I think, I don't know if a team would take the risk and sign him with giving up a draft pick. Eduardo Rodriguez, he's solid, he's good, but I think the Red Sox need to upgrade the rotation. I don't think Eduardo Rodriguez is necessarily the answer for the back end of the rotation. He was good in the postseason, but he was inconsistent for the majority of this season. But, with the QO attached to him, I don't think a team is going to give up draft pick compensation for him. So the Red Sox, they did it to themselves, not, They knew what they were getting themselves into. So we'll see what happens. Eddie's got, until November 17th to decide. Either whatever happens. I'm kind of indifferent on it. I'd like for them to upgrade and not run it back with the same 5 guys in the rotation. But if they do, they do. Or maybe Eddie accepts it and they trade him. We'll see. We'll see what happens with Eduardo Rodriguez.
Absolutely. We'll see what happens with them and all the other qualifying offers that were extended. We'll take a look at them next week as we have a little bit of a better picture on who's accepted, who hasn't, I believe that would be, 2 days before the deadline. So we'll get a little more of a better picture then. Any final thoughts on qualifying offers in general before we hop onto the awards?
Who will be this year's Kevin Gossman? Or Marcus Stroman, who will accept it out of nowhere and end up having a really, really good season and end up getting a big payday in free agency?
I'm going to go with Raziel Iglesias.
Fair enough.
I honestly think that, actually, your question was if he's going to accept it, right? Yeah. I could see him accepting it.
Iglesias?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it could go either way. I think there's enough
He's not
teams.
getting $18 million on the open market for AAV.
No, he's not going to get that for 1 year, but I don't know if maybe he bets on himself to try and get
like a 3-year, like $40 million deal, something like that.
Because here's my other thing. There's a lot of teams that probably would pay that to get a closer like him.
Yeah.
And he didn't have a fantastic year, but he had a good year.
You're saying the upside is there.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. He's an interesting case, but you know what? I do see if he goes with a 1-year deal somewhere, I think he kind of goes into that dominant mode that he really was for a while with the Reds. He was a really good pitcher for them for a long time.
Oh, definitely, for sure.
And we'll see. I'm not sure how old he is. I know he's in his probably early 30s, right? Is he 31 or 32?
I think he's 30. He will be entering his age 32 season this coming year.
So I think now is around the time where you're going to see that. But we'll have to see. So wrapping up the qualifying offers there, just a reminder, if you want to call in about anything baseball related that we're talking about, that number is 202-319-5106, 202-319-5106. So the award finalists, of course, have been announced for all of the major awards. We're going to find them out over the next week or so. The announcement dates are staggered. I have to say, a little weird. I don't really like how it's kind of slowly laid out, especially because we got the Hank Aaron Award announcement for both leagues today, but we're not going to find out.
We got the Gold Gloves on Sunday.
Right, we got the Gold Gloves on Sunday, but we don't know the Silver Sluggers yet, and we won't know the Cy Youngs or MVPs until I believe the 17th or 18th of November. So I don't really know what's going on with MLB here. This might be a networking thing where they need to have the different programs, is my assumption here, but we'll see about that. But let's talk about the Hank Aaron Awards, because that's the first and foremost thing just announced for the AL and NL. And, James, I don't think that they got these wrong, especially with the caliber of hitters that they chose in the seasons that they had.
No, first off, to start with the National League, Bryce Harper was the National League Hank Aaron Award, and you really couldn't go wrong with Bryce here. I mean, he had a 170 WRC plus and a 431 OBA. You know, I mean, that's obviously first in the National League. He was tremendous. He had a 1044 OPS, a 615 slug. You know, Bryce, besides, this was the best year of his career besides 2015, and I think you look at the body of work between him and everyone else in the National League, he was head and shoulders above everyone else. For a while, all these awards were Fernando Tatis's to lose. I mean, I don't think there's any question about that.
And he lost them.
Yes, he lost them. Bryce Harper separated himself in the second half. Tatis was good, but he wasn't his usual self. You know, 35 bombs to go along with it. You know, Bryce was tremendous this year, and I think he's got a big award coming up next week with the National League MVP. This is the guy who the Phillies signed. This is the guy who apparently was voted the most overrated player in the game 2 years ago. Now he's one of the most underrated players in the game, or maybe not underrated now that he's getting all the recognition. But for a little bit there this year, he was one of the more underrated players in the game, believe it or not. You know, I think people took Bryce Harper for granted, took what he did for granted because he was so good and held to such a high standard and pedestal for so long because of the expectations that came with being drafted number 1 overall as a 17-year-old. But he's done nothing but produce essentially his whole major league career, and if he continues this, he is a surefire Hall of Famer. That's without a doubt.
I couldn't have said it better myself, and we'll talk about this a little more when we get into the MVP discussion. But, James, I'm sure you're aware there's only 32 men in the history of baseball who have won multiple MVP awards, and the only ones not in the Hall of Fame are Roger Maris and the steroid users. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that you want to talk about cementing your place in Cooperstown, this seems like one of the ways to do it.
Yeah, definitely, and I think, you know, the rest of Bryce's numbers stack up for themselves. He's still got 11 more years after this year to you know, continue to add to that resume. But if you want to look at his career stats real quick, he's a 279 career hitter, 267 bombs, 752 RBIs, and a career 916 OPS. So
It's pretty good.
He's clearly posted.
And he's got a lot of time to go ahead and try to get those milestone numbers. I mean, we got, 9 more years, 10 more years of that, so at least with the Philadelphia Phillies. So we'll see what happens with Bryce. Before we talk about the AL Hank Aaron Award winner, James, I believe that we forgot a major news segment, and I apologize for that because it is not one that we forgot on purpose and is one that needs to be highlighted. And that, of course, is the retirement of Buster Posey.
Yes, Buster Posey, one of the greatest players of this past generation, a 3-time World Series champion, a 7-time All-Star. The list goes on for Posey. He was, you know, me growing up being a catcher pretty much my entire life, he was always one of my favorite players growing up. He was, you know, the model citizen in terms of both what to do on the field, off the field, how to play as a catcher. You know, some people might say Yadier Molina, but personally I think Buster Posey's the best catcher of his generation.
Oh, I agree.
You know, I know his career was shorter than what people thought it would be. You know, he retired at the age of 34, but Buster Posey was hands down the best catcher. Okay, maybe not hands down, but Buster Posey was the best catcher of his generation. You know, 7-time All-Star, MVP, Rookie of the Year in 2010. I believe he won 2 Silver Sluggers, maybe 3.
1 Gold Glove as well.
3 Silver Sluggers, 1 Gold Glove, multiple top 10 MVP finishes. I mean, he caught 3 no-hitters. 4 no-hitters. He caught a perfect game. He caught 2 Tim Lincecum no-hitters. I think he caught 1 more. So he caught at least 3 no-hitters, maybe 4. But Buster Posey, what more can you say about him? In his illustrious career that began in 2010 and ended this past season, he had a 44.9 career WAR. He had 1,500 hits on the dot, 158 home runs, and was a career 300 hitter. He hit 302. In his final season, there's no better way than to go out on top. In 113 games this year, missed some time with a thumb injury. He hit 18 home runs, had 56 RBIs, hit 304, and had an 889 OPS. Yes, Posey's career was shorter than most people thought. He probably, he probably had more left in the tank. You know, he wanted to retire because he wanted to go home with family. He wanted to spend more time with family, spend more time with his kids. Remember, he sat out 2020 due to COVID because of twins that he and his wife adopted. He's a great person off the field. He's a tremendous player and leader on the field. A 3-time World Series champion. A 44.9 career WAR, yes, is lower. 1,500 hits is lower in terms of Hall of Fame standards. But you look at the position Buster Posey played. You look at the standard, how high of a standard he played at for so long. Buster Posey's a Hall of Famer. Probably not a first ballot Hall of Famer, but is definitely going to be a Hall of Famer by the time his 10 years on the ballot are up.
Oh, he's a Hall of Famer for sure. I mean, like you said, it's a close race between him and Molina for this generation's best catcher. Of course, Molina's got the longevity factor going for him, but I have to agree with you. I mean, I think it is Buster Posey, and it was a shorter career, but you gotta think about these guys who decide to go out on top.
And the elite level of performance. He never wavered. He always was an elite player.
Right, and even more so I want to point out because there's a lot of people who don't do that. I'd say the majority of people don't do that. Everyone tries to hang on till the very end. You've seen this with so many great talents and Hall of Famers, but props to him for saying, he knows when it's time to hang the cleats up, and I respect his decision. I'm sure a lot of Giants fans are upset, that he's not going to be back next year. It's going to be weird having, extended period of time with Buster Posey not the catcher behind the plate in San Francisco. But, that's the way it is, and congratulations to Buster Posey for a great career, and apologies for forgetting that in the news.
Posey had a tremendous career. He was the epitome of what it meant to be a Giant during this run of success and what it meant to be a baseball player. He put his head down and he played. He didn't care about anything else. He was all about business when he stepped across the lines. I think he earned the respect of every one of his teammates. He earned the respect of every fan who watched him play. I think he was a lot of Giants fans' favorite player. What this means for the Giants going forward, I don't know. I think there's definitely a gaping hole in their roster now in terms of production, in terms of leadership in the clubhouse. That could put a huge dent into what they're thinking, into how they will perform next year. But that's not what matters right now. What matters is Buster Posey going out on his terms, sustaining elite performance throughout the entirety of his career. He was a tremendous catcher, and he caught, I don't know how many games he caught, but he caught a large portion of games. He only had 27 pass balls.
Yeah, that's impressive. It's
in an
absolutely
11-year
impressive.
career, he had 27 pass balls. I mean, you think about that, that's hard to do. That's hard. The level of success and the standard of greatness that Posey set for catchers in his generation, I think if you ask most guys in the game right now, they would vote for Posey for the Hall of Fame. Hopefully the voters don't get too caught up in the numbers not being there in terms of what it would have been if he had held on longer. The players know, the fans know, Buster Posey is a Hall of Famer. Plain and simple.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Buster Posey, a Hall of Famer one day. He will be in Cooperstown for sure. So let's get back to the awards now. I think we were discussing the AL Hank Aaron Award, and deservingly so. It went to, I think, without a doubt, the best hitter in the AL this year. That, of course, being Vladimir Guerrero Jr. with the Toronto Blue Jays, who had an absolutely insane year, and at one point really was flirting with that triple crown, and unfortunately did not get that there, but he had a season for the ages, and I think, James, unfortunately, the way to put it here is he had it at the same time that Shohei Ohtani decided to do his thing as well.
Any other season, or if Vladdy was in the National League, he would have won MVP. He would have won MVP over Bryce Harper, I think.
Oh, without question.
He was in the National League. Any other season, Vladdy is probably a unanimous MVP. I don't think there's any question about that. But Vladimir Guerrero Jr., what more can you say about Vladdy? I mean, a 10.02 OPS this year. He had a 6.7 F4. He had 48 bombs, 123 runs scored. He had over 100 RBIs. He's 22 years old, and he's probably the best hitter in the American League.
And he, correct me if I'm wrong, will win an MVP one day.
Yes, probably next year, and he will win one within the next 2 or 3 years.
Wow, next 2 to 3, okay. Hey, I agree with you. I mean, watching him this year,
should have won this year. He should have over Ohtani, but any other year he wins. He had an historic season. He's arguably the best hitter in baseball. And he's only 22. I mean, he's only getting better.
Well, and the other thing to point out here is, right, when he was called up, this was the biggest call-up I remember since Bryce Harper. Oh, yeah. It really was.
The hype was there, and it took him a couple of years to really get going.
I was going to say, to see him this year finally become that player, it really reminded me of a 2015 Bryce Harper type season, where the guy finally, and he was 22, or I believe Harper was 23 in his 2015
Harper was 22.
Season. He was 22 as well. Yeah. I guess 22 is the magic number, but just to see him develop, and so many people, when he came up, he didn't have a great rookie year, and then the next year was not fantastic
COVID
either.
Year too.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of people are just so quick to give up on him. It's like, the guy's 20, he's 21. Like, you got to give him time. And I mean, this is what happens when you give guys like this absolute superstars time.
Yeah, Major League Baseball is hard. Hitting at the Major League level is extremely hard. This is not a flash in the pan season for Vlad Jr. This is the standard that he set for himself for the next decade. And trust me, he will live up to the hype. He's starting to, and he will continue to.
How much do you think taking him out of that third base role helped him?
A lot, and I think the 40 pounds that he lost in the offseason worked wonders. He knew he had to get himself in shape, and credit to him, he did it. He didn't sit around and get lazy and get fat.
Yeah.
He lost weight at an early age. He moved positions. He knew exactly what he needed to do, and he's going to be the best hitter in the league for a long time to come.
He's going to be a centerpiece of a Blue Jays team that most likely will be making the playoffs very soon. They almost did this year. They came within a game. And let's jump in then to the MVP discussions, because the Blue Jays have not one, but 2 MVP finalists. If you're not aware, something the MLB does now is they announce the top 3 finalists for each of the major awards, and then about a week later we go ahead and find out who actually won. So let's get into that. The AL MVP candidates, of course, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., as we talked about, Shohei Ohtani, and Marcus Semien on the 1-year Prove Me deal is an AL MVP finalist. Now, he's not going to win it. He's not going to win the AL MVP, but how crazy is that the Blue Jays have 2 of the 3 spots and they didn't even make the playoffs?
That offense is potent, but they might very well lose Semien this year. Somebody is going to pay Marcus Semien a lot for his services. Whether they overpay or not, that's the big question. They probably will end up overpaying, especially depending on what position they have him play. But Semien deserves it. He had a tremendous year, the most home runs ever in the history of Major League Baseball for a second baseman in a single season, I believe 44.
Yep.
He deserves it. Vladdy deserves it, but Shohei Ohtani is going to win the MVP this year. I don't think there's any debate about it. What he did on the mound in the batter's box was tremendous. He will probably win the MVP unanimously as well.
See, what Vladimir Guerrero Jr. did with the bat was unbelievable, and he was the best hitter in the AL. But the thing is, what Shohei Ohtani did with both the bat and the on the mound at the same time, it's not just unbelievable, it's historic. It's something we haven't seen in 100 years.
And now the precedent is set for Ohtani to do this every year, which is going to be very hard to do, but Ohtani's the most valuable player in all of baseball. I mean, he's a generational talent. There's no debate. Ohtani's the MVP. He had one of the best seasons ever this year, and congrats to Vladdy and Semien. But it's Shohei's a world. Everyone bow down to the MVP.
I think you could make arguments for some of the other awards, but I don't really see any sensible baseball fan or writer or analyst or whatever you may be making an argument other than this for the AL.
No.
Shohei Ohtani is your 2021 AL MVP. You're not going to hear any arguments from me. Let's move on to the NL, where we have somewhat of a closer race, but if you're basing this on Vegas betting odds, it's not as close as you may think. And I think a lot of baseball fans and writers as well are starting to come around to the fact that Bryce Harper is the 2021 NL MVP.
Yeah, Bryce Harper finally had his big season in Philly. He had a solid year in 20. He had an up and down year in 19, but Bryce Harper finally had his breakout season in 2021 with the Phillies. He overtook Tatis in the second half in pretty much every major statistical category. He's the National League. He should be the National League MVP in 2021. What he did was incredible. He's living up to that big contract, and what he did can't be understated.
No, can't be understated at all. I mean, we've said it so many times on here. During September, when he was still playing, the fact that the Phillies were in the playoff race until almost the very end was almost solely because of Bryce Harper. It was because of there was one other guy who we'll talk about in a second, but it's remarkable that there was no other player on a team that really just put him on their back like he did and just almost carried them. And hey, you know what? It's small baby steps, but Bryce Harper having the season he did is the reason that the Phillies had their first winning season in 10 years. And it's because, I would say, of him. And you have fantastic performances from Tatis and Soto. Tatis, of course, the thing, I don't know about you, James, with me is the games missed. He missed a lot of games.
He missed a lot of time.
And I don't like giving an MVP to a guy who played as few games as him. And you have Soto, who had a fantastic year. Juan Soto's going to win 1, 2, maybe 3 MVPs in his lifetime. But I'm sorry, he played on a team with 90-plus losses. You can't give him the MVP. And, and there's the argument, none of these guys made the postseason. It's ridiculous. Where's Riley? Where's Brandon Crawford, I've heard as well. But the problem is those guys weren't I'd say, more valuable than the 3 that we're talking about right now. But also, it's not an argument to say, they didn't make the postseason. It's not their fault. If Bryce Harper was on another team, they probably do make the postseason. It's not his fault. It's not like he didn't try every day. Yeah. And something I want to point out, every single candidate for MVP this year missed the playoffs. That's the first time in the history of baseball that's happened. Do you know that? That's unbelievable. It's the first time in the history of baseball, the top 3 contenders for AL MVP, all of them missed the playoffs.
That's crazy. That's crazy to think about, but
it is. It really is crazy to think about. But
actually, I think 15. Bryce Harper, Paul Goldschmidt, Joey Votto.
I'm talking about in both leagues.
Oh, in both leagues.
In both leagues. No, this is the first time.
That's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. So Harper and Ohtani, there are our picks here on MPNC. Let's do a lightning round here for the rest of the picks as we're coming up on 8 p.m. here. AL Cy Young, I think we're going to agree with almost all of the remaining ones, but Robbie Ray?
Robbie Ray.
Yeah, Robbie
Ray over Garrett Cole.
Robbie Ray over Garrett Cole. Lance Lynn, hey, nothing against him. He had a great season, but he really did regress in that second half. Had a couple bad games, unfortunately. NL Cy Young's a little bit closer than you may think. I'm giving the edge to Corbin Burns. How about you, James?
Corbin Burns. We talked about it in September. Corbin Burns had the best season of any National League pitcher.
Without question. Of course, the other two, Max Scherzer, huge deadline acquisition, and he's going to get another big deal going well into his 40s after the performance he turned in after being traded from the Nationals to the Dodgers. And Zach Wheeler, hey, can we talk about him for a second? How about finally just establishing himself as an elite pitcher in this league after the contract he signed with the Phillies?
He had a tremendous season living up to that big contract. He finally came out, burst onto the scene, and showed people the elite prospect and the elite pitcher he's been hyped up to be the last 5-6 years. He finally lived up to the hype this year and proved a lot of people wrong and had a tremendous season.
And let me just highlight for a second, of course, the former GM of the New York Mets after this deal was signed when he said, we're really happy that we were able to make Zach appear like a guy who was worth the money he got. And how satisfying was it for Phillies fans and honestly anyone who's not a fan of the Mets and their former GM to see him absolutely dominate not only the league this year but the Mets in general, capped off by his tremendous complete game shutout against the Mets on Roy Halladay Day this year. So fantastic season for both Scherzer and Wheeler, but I think we agree Corbin Burns is getting the NL Cy Young. Let's move on to the Rookie of the Year in the American League. 3 solid choices. I don't know if there's a clear-cut one here, James.
I'd give it to Arozarena. Body of work speaks for itself.
Yeah, I'd have to go with Arozarena as well. Hard to forget, or hard to remember that he is a rookie still. It seems like he's been in the league for 2 years now, of course, because of the postseason that he turned in 2020. But no, he is still a rookie, and I would have to agree he's going to be getting that. Wander Franco, another Ray on that list as well. I don't think he played enough to go ahead and win the award. I think that would be the main argument. And then Luis Garcia for the Houston Astros. But I think it goes with Arozarena. Body of work, like James said, speaks for itself. There's an argument to be made for someone other than this in the NL, but I do think that Jonathan India is the NL Rookie of the Year.
I'd give it to India as well.
The
but
Reds
you
were
gotta
hot,
India was hot.
Exactly, but you gotta think about Trevor Rogers here. Because he had a fantastic season, and he is proving once again how good this Miami rotation is going to be one day.
Yeah, especially he had a tremendous first half. I think he tailed off a little bit in the second half, but yes, overall he had a great season. But I think India's body of work speaks for itself, especially his red hot second half.
Oh, absolutely red hot. Moving on to the Manager of the Year in the AL, Dusty Baker, Servais, and Kevin Cash. I don't know. This one I feel like could go 3 ways, and maybe just 2 for some people, but I got to give it to the Mariners manager here.
Yeah, I'll give it to Scott Servais too. One quick thing, where's Alex Cora? The Red Sox were supposed to finish with 80 wins this year. They finished with 92 and won the first wild card. Where's Alex Cora?
Yeah, that's definitely an argument to be made. I guess the reason that he's not on there and Baker is because, actually, I don't know what the reason is.
Yeah, it's preposterous.
I got to imagine if you're going to take someone else, it's going to be Baker.
Or
remove
Cash.
him.
The Rays made the World Series last year, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I guess there wasn't a whole lot of clear-cut options for those last 2 spots. Scott Servais is, I think, going to be the winner with what the Mariners did, but I'd have to agree with you. Alex Cora not being top 3, a little suspect. I'm not sure if there's a little bit of resentment being held on to there from some potential scandals, but let's move on to the NL. This one's clear-cut. Gabe Kapler is going to win Manager of the Year. I think that's no question.
100%. Giants were projected to win 70 games. They won 107. Gabe Kapler's Manager of the Year.
Yeah, and the San Francisco Giants, one that I'm very excited to talk about in our upcoming off-season discussion series. Of course, I said we're going to be talking about the AL West next week, and then we'll go to the NL West the week after, but the Giants are in an interesting position because of the season they had, and also because now of Buster Posey leaving. There's a lot of moves they can make, and they're already been connected to a ton of names.
Yep.
Definitely one to watch for sure. But as I said, we're going to talk about the AL West first. So next week, we'll start our postseason discussion. Half the show is going to be news. It's going to be qualifying offers next week. If any awards are announced by then, we'll touch on them. And then the other half of the show, full-on off-season discussion. We take one division, we go through all 5 teams in the second half of the show, and we tell you what we think they should do and what we think they are going to do. A very interesting division next week. Be sure to tune in for that. Do not miss it. A reminder, again, we'll be live 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on WC Radio with that next week. And if you want to listen to our shows in podcast form, go ahead, follow us at Nat Pastime Cap on Instagram. They are posted on YouTube there, and Spotify will keep you updated. Still not a great situation there. Before we sign off here, one more statement here from James.
Yeah, rest in peace to a longtime Red Sox player and broadcaster, Jerry Remy. He died about a week and a half ago after a long bout with lung cancer. He was in his 7th remission. I mean, he kept knocking it off. He continued to take a break every year and then come back. I think everybody thought he was going to come back again next year, but unfortunately, this time cancer beat him. You know, cancer's the worst. Jerry Remy had the heart of a lion. He was a warrior. He was the voice of my childhood growing up listening to Red Sox baseball. Fenway Park and Red Sox baseball won't be the same without him. He'll be missed by everyone, not only Red Sox fans but baseball fans alike. He's beloved by everyone in New England, every Red Sox fan, and I think I speak for all of Red Sox Nation that listening to games won't be the same, and I think he's irreplaceable. You really can't replace him. It's a huge loss, and he should be remembered for his valiant fight.
We have a huge respect here on MPNC for the world of broadcasting and the voices of baseball. So a huge loss with Jerry Remy. Rest in peace indeed to him. And indeed, the Red Sox, unfortunately, will not be the same without him. But thank you to him for fantastic life and great service with especially his voice. And with that said, that's going to conclude this edition of Nation's Pastime in the Nation's Capital. I've been your host, Andrew Snaith, here with my co-hosts James Higgin and Robbie Cruz. And we'll see you next week, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, for the first of our off-season discussion. Have a fantastic rest of your evening.
Stove is hot.